Welcome to another episode of the Office Altering Hire and Empower with Molly McGrath podcast. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. If you're a first-time listener, hopefully you'll become a long-time listener. As always, I'm your show host, Molly McGrath, founder of Hiring and Empowering Solutions and creator of this revolutionary podcast. You can check us out at hiringandempowering.com. Y'all, I am so excited for today's guest. I have been trying to get my dear friend, Donna Kendrick, on my podcast for, when we met, maybe 3 years ago or so at Thought Leader Academy, Donna.
Exactly.
Yeah. I remember sitting next to you and hearing talk, and I'm like, of course, what do you do? And talking to me about what you do with your financial services agency and in regards to your work that you do and that you're so passionate about with working with widows. And as you know, my passion is estate planning, elder law, probate, trust admin, asset protection attorneys. I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to have you on my podcast. You've been busy with the book launch, with the course launch, with your financial services practice. So I'm so excited to have you here. Tell our listeners a little bit about you and what you do.
Good. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on your podcast. It is a privilege and an honor.
Yeah.
So hi, I'm Donna Kendrick, and I actually own Septum Financial. That's my maiden name. And that's a financial planning practice where we do financial planning for families in transition. And how did I get here? How did this niche or niche, depending on where you are in the US, how did it occur? And it occurred back during a life change that I had personally back in 2013 after giving up my career, following my husband abroad, having 3 kids, landing back stateside to the Philadelphia area where we were both born and raised. My husband passed away suddenly. And I had an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old, and it was foggy and it was yuck, right? And so I took 2 years kind of slowing my roll, working with a financial advisor to really help understand what decisions I had to make right away, which ones could slow their roll, right? I keep saying that, which ones were transitional and what were my long-term goals later on. And that was really, really helpful to me. So about 2 years when some of the fog cleared and I knew I had to go back to work full time, that changes you, a big loss like that. And I was like, whatever I do next, right, it has to be in mission with really helping people push forward, right? We're not going to let lemons sit as lemons. We're going to make lemonade out of this. So I went to my financial advisor and said, how do I do what you do for people? How do I learn how to do that? I want to do this. I want to come back. I want to do financial services specifically for these families in transitions, the widows, the divorcees, people who tomorrow feel very different than they're today. Went back to school, mentored under that financial advisor, flipped my career upside down on its head, opened my own practice a few years later, and this is where I am now. It's just led into a passion of trying to really help these people in transition, men, women, really understand where they stand, the strength of their own income, strength of what they have as assets, and how to prepare themselves moving forward. It's been great.
I love that your niche is really focusing on widowhood, divorce, blended families, which you're like, I could check widowhood, I could check the blended families now that you're remarried, right?
I am. I got married last year. It was a whirlwind. I had actually written a book called A Guide to Widowhood, Navigating the First 3 Years with Your Heart, Soul, and Finances Intact. With the help of my then fiance, with doing all the marketing behind it. It was a good venture. And that book came out of a result of seeing so many people in 2020 that had lost spouses and didn't have access to good advice during that time because we were all social distancing. How to get a book or a resource in the hands of people sooner rather than later. And then, got remarried like 2 months after that, after the dust settled, because it's a heavy lift. You know, you're a fellow author. And it's been wonderful. But learning how to blend finances too, after I was all my way for a good 10 years, right, was difficult. And we're still on the learning curve. And that's part of our passion for this year is really having the conversation with couples of like really how to make financial decisions together and how to prepare one another so that once one of the spouses will be in widowhood, somebody will pass, right? And how do we prepare one another for that? And how do we protect our loved ones? And God forbid if we both pass at the same time, how do we help the executor of our will and those we leave behind, get that clarity. So a little bit of work ahead of the time, rather than later. So it's been a whirlwind, and I love every minute of it.
You're so passionate about it. I'm going to have in the links how to get a copy of Donna's book, but it doesn't stop there. What I love is you have an 8-week course that you guide people through navigating widowhood with their heart and soul and finances intact, and how to make sound financial decisions through that process of grief, and helping them build their confidence, reduce worry, no matter where they are in that journey. And that's been a massive success as well. So it's just not here's the book, but also here's a course to support you for 8 weeks through the process as well. And have, the greatest different definition I ever heard of anxiety is lack of information, and how to feel empowered with that information, because that's when you don't have that, that's where the vicious cycle of anxiety and worry and all that on top of grief comes, right?
100%. And we found too that the book was wonderful, right? And so many people are reading it being like, wow, I wish I had this beforehand, right? I wish I would have waited until widowhood to get it. I would have had my ducks in line. And that sometimes can leave you feeling out of control when you come through a life transition or widowhood, of like, how do I do it better next? Or how do I say it? It knocks your confidence, right? And being able to do it on your own. And I found that when we have that 8-week course together, it's the group that actually provides most of the strength, because it's people of that same type of loss that are kind of pulling together for one another. So you're learning the strategies, right? You're learning how to take that next best step, but it's the community feeling of other people that have been there that make you be like, oh, I'm not alone. Like this is pretty common. And you can share experiences, and that's what bonds people together. So it's lovely.
And what I love too is that on your website you have a free checklist, right? A loss of spouse checklist. And you said before we started recording, and I wrote it down, like, don't wait for widowhood, that you're hearing more and more from clients that you're having proactive conversations, and like, I wish we would have had this conversation. I wish we would have had this information before the fact than after the fact, right?
Yeah, and that's so much of it. So many of my clients come to me, or I'm even sitting at like a Thanksgiving table, right? And I can't help myself. I'm like, but you guys have your state documents, right? And we all think we're invincible. Well, I'm middle aged now. I just turned 50, right? So when you're sitting at the Thanksgiving table with a brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and they're like, well, no, not yet. We figure we're healthy. I'm like, oh, wait a second, slow that roll. And then it turns into the next question, like, wait, but you check your beneficiaries on your 401k, right? And all your life insurances, because you probably got that one, like the life insurance policy, when it was like first girlfriend number one before you got married, right? You changed that to your wife, correct? That's an awkward conversation at Thanksgiving, but I go there because I want to see them taken care of. I don't want to be helping pick up pieces at the end. I'm happy to hold their hand. I'm happy to be there. But if the couple themselves can have open conversations and can realize what are the steps we have to take to make sure we're protected together, that makes it so much easier, right? And then I don't have to break the news to them that, Fifi, the girlfriend from 1988, just got that life insurance, not you. Have a good day. Like,
Yeah. I love that. And, estate planning attorneys, probate attorneys, Medicaid, whatever you're doing, listen up. I think Donna's book is a wonderful resource for you to hand out to your clients when they're alive and well in that early stage of the process. Donna, as I told you, many of my estate planning attorneys work very closely with financial advisors, and feel that it's imperative in regards to, just like you. Oh, great, you got all your financial ducks in order. For any of this to work, next step is you have to go see a trust and estate attorney and get that intact as well. So it's really a multidisciplinary approach. But I'm thinking of many of my attorneys who do annual maintenance programs. They do a tremendous amount of education and things of that nature. So I think you would be a wonderful fit. In addition, for my estate planning attorneys, for your value add in the vision meeting, when you're meeting with the clients, give them a copy of Donna's book, and I'll have a link in where they can get that. And also the possibility of offering this course for them as well. Wow. I mean,
yeah.
how incredible to go hand in hand with people after death when they're dealing with the probate and trust admin, but giving them the checklist and having the conversation up front and center, right?
No, I appreciate it so much. And yeah, and we actually have the course itself. We're also going to have it recorded because not everyone does like the group setting. Some people are just like, nope, just want to do it at my own time. Or like myself, if I sign up for an 8-week course, I'm probably doing all of it in one day at like 2 times speed, right? So we want people to be able to get the information how they digest it best, whether it be through our podcast, The Widow Wisdom and Wealth, whether it be through the 8-week course, the book itself, or an evergreen course that will wind up, they can get the resources at their leisure, right? When it works for them. However it works best. We just want that information to be in the hands of the listeners. We want that information to be in the hands of the widows and many times the people who love them. I've had experience where people have gotten the book and read it and they're not the widow or widower. It's the best friend of that person, right? And they're trying to
Wow.
spread a little bit of guidance or a little bit of, well, maybe you should ask your financial advisor this, or this is how we find a financial advisor. And to your point too, of working hand in hand with estate attorneys, like many of times it's our financial net worth or our spreadsheet of where our assets are is what we're handing to those attorneys to make sure that everything does have the right beneficiary review and that's updated. We always say, like, put that in the front of your estate documents year after year. So if something happens to you, that's where the information is. Another really great resource that we have on that website it's called Personal Document Locator. And it's like an eight page, you can print it out via PDF, make many pages. And it kind of is that guideline of even those things that should something happen to you, like where is the key to the safe deposit box, right? Or I always use the example, like the question is, what town were you born in? My kids would say, for one of those credential questions, they'd be, oh yeah, Philadelphia. Well, no, I wasn't. I was born in Cheltenham, right outside of Philadelphia. And those are the questions that I found as a widow I needed to know about my late husband. And I didn't have those answers. Also lets everyone know like where passwords are, right? Or who that next contact is, who the estate attorney is, who the financial planner is, who holds the life insurance policy. So it's almost like a roadmap for whoever's settling your estate or that person who's in grief because they just lost their spouse to follow to make it a little easier. Let's take some of the challenges out of this because you're making decisions during grief.
Mhm. And so, what stands out for you as you're talking about this? I've heard you on multiple podcasts during a lot of our open coaching and things of that nature in our thought leader group. Your financial advisor must have done something that really made you pause for you to go back when you hit that 2 year mark. You knew, if I remember correctly, when you met with the financial advisor first, somewhere I believe I heard where he said, you got 2 years and then you got to get your butt back to work. You're going to
Yeah.
have to start working, right?
Yeah, it was really one of those, it wasn't just the numbers, right? Like he probably, when he first sat down and saw my numbers, and I always say I carried a tote bag with me of all of my information, like Social Security, life insurance, investment accounts, like it was there. I just slid it over to the table to him. He was so well experienced. He probably could have done my financial plan in his sleep that night and given it back to me the next day. But what did he do? He did that value-based conversation. Really, what do I want out of myself? How long do I think I need to stay home to raise my kids because they were little, right? If I go back
Mm.
to work, is there childcare for them? Can I afford to stay in the house? Honestly, that was the house my husband passed in. Did I want to stay in there? Could that be something that could free the children and I up? And which that's exactly what we did. 2 years later, we sold that house and moved. And it was a wonderful fresh start for us. But those were the types of questions. And so he had like contingency plans kind of laid out for me. Well, if you don't want to go back to work right now, this is the quality of life you can live, right? Or if you wanted to go back to work when the kids are out of high school, this is how much you'd have to make because we're missing that long-term savings goal for my late husband because I had given up my career, right? Those were those really value-based questions that he would ask me. So I knew the roadmap depending on how I chose to raise my life. And I always said, like, give me 2 years, right? I'm a person that gets bored pretty easy, right? And so even though I knew my kids would be okay, my oldest would have been at that point in time 14, right? And he could go home on his own. He could start dinner for the family. His sister, who's 13, acts like she was 22. It's all going to be fine. So I knew I could go back at that point in time. And I knew the kids probably would have been settled. We had just moved into the area 2 months before my husband passed. They would have had grown their roots. I would have felt better in the community. So that was kind of the path I chose. And I communicated with them like, you're right. I just need to be able to afford life. Thank goodness we had life insurance. Thank goodness I had my late husband's pension. But I knew I had to go back, right? As well as of him saying, okay, well, if that's what you want to do, this is where we are, right? And this is what I want to do in retirement. Well, then how do I afford that lifestyle moving forward? And I don't think if he would have asked all of those questions, I would have even opened the possibility to going back. When I actually sat with him, we actually had to say, well, okay, I probably wouldn't be making money in this industry for the first few years, right? Just starting out. So can I afford that? Can I afford not to have an income while I built my practice? Does that work for me? And those were those types of questions that I don't think every financial advisor would sit and ask. So sure, it made a wonderful impression on me. And his faith in the fact that I was educated, I was pulled together. He saw from me coming to my tote bag or to him with my tote bag that this chick is organized, right? She's not playing around. She just wants it done. So he knew I had that goal in mind of if we're going to do it, we're going to do it well.
Wow.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, you said values add, but I'm hearing a whole different level of like coaching and compassion add to that because he made an impression and somehow you felt one way walking in there. You felt another way 2 years later working with him, meeting with him enough to raise your hand and say, is how can I learn what you're doing? I bet you if he was missing the compassion driven counsel, I mean, what financial advisor would ask you, well, do you guys want to stay in the house? They'd be like, you can stay in the house. That'd be the end of the conversation. And really asking you about what's going to heal your hearts, your spirits, and what's good for you all to start cracking open those questions. So if you experienced it, you went through it, now you built a very, very successful business, financial services business. Now your massive passion project about your own experience with your course and your book. If you're going to give some drive-by coaching to our financial advisors and or family law attorneys or estate and elder law and after death attorneys in regards to how to broach a conversation with your clients and how to incorporate the potential of somebody's going to die, right? I love that you said that several times. What would you give in order for them to distinguish yourself and how to kind of crack that conversation, especially when they're alive and well? And then maybe secondly, after death, because nobody ever wants to talk about it. They're afraid they're going to bring it up and you're going to lose it in their conference room and they're not going to know how to handle it, right?
And a lot of that is one, making sure that the conversation you have has empathy with it, right? Make sure that you're using some of the right words. There's kinder, gentler ways to approach conversations, right? And take some additional training on there. I know there's many people that I follow in this space that's actually their specialty is teaching financial advisors to have empathy in their conversations and how to
Mm.
have conversation starters, right? A good example might even be saying, okay, we are going to focus in this 6-month annual review on protection planning. Protection planning is making sure we have estate documents in file, making sure they are up to date, making sure you have a working connection with your estate attorney. How long has it been? Is it time for an update? As well as life insurance and titling. That's what we're going to focus on. By saying that this is a focus and that everyone in your client base is having that conversation at the 6-month mark, that frees you up, right? We've taken some of that awkwardness out because they know what we are going to be talking about. And I always say too, I love having the relationship with estate planning attorneys and the financial advisors because we do know those intimate parts, right? Where there
Mm.
might be have a box of tissues in your conference room. There might be tears. Don't panic. Let the person cry. Like it's okay. And knowing that, but being able to say, hey, I'm bringing in this widow. She just lost her husband 2 weeks ago and she is paranoid, talking about myself, that something's going to happen to her. I'm going to sit with her while you do your intake. Is that okay? Like, and I felt so supported when my financial advisor went with me to this new estate attorney to update my estate documents, making the decision on guardianship for my kids, things like that. And I felt like I had someone there listening with me. You're emotional during those conversations. So it's almost as if like, oh, did I hear that correctly? Well, you had someone else there that you trust taking notes. They're there with you too. So I always say like explain to our clients how this relationship is going to work, how you're there to kind of lead that team of their financial professionals or state attorneys or accountants, as well as when you are having these very personal conversations, be humble, be personal. My favorite quote is, "A wise man once said nothing." Sometimes you can learn more about the values of your client and where they want life to go. God forbid they're not there, right? By just listening, letting them just talk through it. That's how we really deem a lot of the answers that we were looking for without having to pry too much.
I love that. And you're very, very fortunate to have an extraordinary financial advisor. As you were talking, for our listeners, family law, whatever type of law that you're doing, I love bringing your financial advisor in there. To your point, you're overwhelmed and they're going to ask you a lot of questions and you may not remember the answer, what have you, for them to sit there. And so for estate planning attorneys, family law attorneys, when you do have a new client, alive and well, and or if it's post-death, I would recommend inviting that financial advisor to come and sit at the table with your client. So because the client gets overwhelmed even on the daily when it comes to financials, right? You deal with a lot of people in transition and they're not on the other side where they're dealing with after death and still very overwhelming throughout the process, right?
Yeah,
People
definitely.
sometimes have embarrassment or shame about their money, whether they have piles of it or none of it.
Yeah. And I have to say too, if the financial advisor is a trusted professional that the estate attorney has worked with before, you can actually have a lot of the shared dialogue. So a lot of the questions that a state attorney might be asking could already have been prepped or answered with the clients before they sit down at the table, such as guardianship for our younger children, right? Like, I would like you to come prepared for the state attorney with maybe 2 or 3 choices for the guardianship, right? So that it's not an impromptu question that the couple's then trying to be polite about in front of someone who might be a new professional colleague for them or resource. They've talked about at home at the kitchen table already, and the financial advisor has helped them guide through that. I think that's a lot of the work beforehand, or even getting your finances squared away and having a list of the net worth and a list of the accounts so that the state attorney doesn't have to ask for it. We've had it. And with your permission, financial advisor could prep the estate attorney already. Think about how productive that conversation will be when
Oh,
you already know. It's almost like, remember when we were younger, I'm dating myself, there was Cliff Notes, and you could actually like read some of the book before reading all of it. Well, that's almost like what it would be working as professionals together to prep in service of this couple that's sitting in front of you, or this widower who just lost his wife, who handled all the finances. How can we make this an easier, more pleasant role for everybody? It's not hard. It is just done with intention.
all right. You just gave me another idea. Take it if you like it, listeners, but a process hack here. So often I'll hear from whether it's family law, estate planning, what have you, prospective client calls in, alive and well, want a trust, what have you, and they get sent this packet of homework that they have to do, and it's so crushing. What are your 401ks? Where are your assets? They don't know, they're overwhelmed, so they don't do it. And then so often the law firm is really struggling to get the data and the information. Here's a hack for you all. And even if you're dealing with probate, interest, admin, or family law, find out who their financial advisor is. Maybe you ask them that question in the beginning. This is what makes our law firm so unique. With your permission, what have you, or if you want, we could schedule a 15-minute meet and greet Zoom with your financial advisor and get in there and I can ask them the questions, collaborate with them, work with them to get all the information and take that pressure off of you. Same thing that happens with probate or trust administration or what have you. They're so often we're delegating back up to the client to do all this asset gathering versus Donna, what I love that you're saying, this is a really phenomenal, if you can embrace this way to kill a couple birds with one stone. Number one, take the homework off the client and call the financial advisor and start working with all the helpers there, then build a relationship with them as well every step of the process and taking the pressure off. And look at all the time that you're saving because so often clients will cancel appointments or I have law firms that will cancel the appointment if the client doesn't fill out all the financial information. I'm like, they're not doing it because they're trying to hide something. They're not doing it because they are trying to get a free appointment and a tire kicker out of you. It is soul crushing. It is overwhelming. They don't know all that information to make it easier on them.
Agreed. You know that industry so well, Molly, and you are
Yeah.
explaining what I have seen so many times. The client is in overwhelm and many of times embarrassed because they don't want to say that they don't know where this is, right? I've had one
Yes,
client say, "Isn't there a database we can just plug in the social security number? It all pops up." I wish, right? Like I wish there was a magic database that gave
there
us that.
is. There
There we
is.
go.
It's called True States. I would highly recommend. I'll send you the link. Tara over there. It's an estate attorney with also a financial background that created a database just for that. If the client signs a disclaimer, you put their social security number and you get a whole asset spreadsheet and they need to do nothing.
Well, Septum Financial listeners, oh my goodness.
Yes. Yes.
Love
So
it.
I'll put it in the show notes for you all and take a look. Schedule a 15-minute consultation with them. They're amazing.
Love it.
Amazing. Yeah, yeah. But there is.
Look
I
what I
just found
learned.
that out. Yes. Oh, Donna, I'm so excited. So tell our listeners the best way to reach out to you and to get in contact with you. Um, First of all, for your financial services.
Yep. So for financial services, pop onto our website. So that's www. It's now listen close. It says it's pronounced a little weird. So it's Sefton Financial, and that's S like Sam, E P like Paul, HTON financial.com. And to get the book, it is widow-wisdom.com. And that's where a lot of those free downloads and links are. So I encourage everyone to kind of pop out there and take a look.
Yes, and I highly recommend getting a copy of Donna's book, A Guide to Widowhood, Navigating the First 3 Years. Your clients will absolutely love it. They'll thank you. And Donna, I am just so incredibly grateful to be in community with you, to have met you, and really to link you up with a lot of my estate planning attorneys because you are doing extraordinary work. You're giving a name, you're giving space to start having these conversations, to start shepherding and helping people over through this process and getting them out of overwhelm and getting them empowered as quick as possible.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Much appreciated, Molly.
Yes. Okay, guys, I'll have all the links in the show notes and the transcriptions there for you too, for anyone who's walking, driving, working out, however you best like to listen to your podcast. Again, continue being legal leaders and creating legal leaders within your team. We've given you so many process hacks here. We've given you so many opportunities how to get the information from your client and ways to really distinguish yourself and up-level your maintenance programs. Bring Donna in, give a copy of her book, have her come speak in any of your annual events that you do on Zoom, in person, what have you. I'm a huge, huge fan of bringing light to this conversation before the fact as much as possible. Like Donna says, I love that. Don't wait for widowhood. Just like you all teach your clients about the time to plan was yesterday.
We've reached the end of yet another episode of the Hire and Empower with Molly McGrath podcast, where dream teams of entrepreneurs in an entrepreneur's world really do come true. Listen, whether you're a business owner, employee, executive, or hiring manager, we fully understand hiring, onboarding, and leadership is expensive, exhausting, often overwhelming, and absolutely time-consuming for the already taxed professional. Well, we have your back on all fronts. For 25 years and counting, we have transformed over 4,000 law firm teams into the most efficient, resourceful, and profitable asset of your business. Check out our Smart Hire solution, our employee leadership program, and the 66-day law firm turnaround at hiringandempowering.com.